creation. Therefore, God can only will himself. And it's part of willing himself, it's with the same act with which he wills himself that he wills whatever he creates. Therefore, the only possible purpose and end of God's creating is himself. It's impossible that he should have created for man. Man is part of what he's wanted in his creation, but man is not what he wanted creation for. He wanted the whole of creation for himself. Is that egotistic? Is that self-centered? No. Because from eternity, part of that willing was also that he wanted a creation. Why did he want a creation? So that some creatures would be able to share in his happiness forever. That's you and me if we get to heaven. And that's what he wanted creation for. Makes sense. It makes sense. But that his act of willing is not self-centered. It's self-centered in the sense that he can't will anything else other than himself, but is not self-centered in that he, as part of his self-willing, he wants creatures that can share in his happiness. So only God can be the central purpose of God and of man. Only God can be the purpose of man. Why? Because man is created by God for God. Man is created, every single human being ever created, is created only for one thing, to go to heaven. You may say, but that's ridiculous for a Muslim who's never had a chance. Every single soul created had a chance. God could not be just if he created a soul without a chance of its going to heaven. It's not possible. Therefore, every man is created only for going to heaven. Is it the last end, the final purpose, the ultimate purpose of every single man, of every Muslim, of every Jew, of every communist, is to go to heaven. And they all have a chance in one way or another. They all had/have a chance. We don't know how that works, but Almighty God has many ways of reaching souls, even souls that are not Catholics. In fact, many Catholics are converts that they were reached by God outside of the church before they came towards the church. We go on. Changing man, man that changes cannot be the purpose of changeless God. Because if God's wanting was centered on man, then men, you and I change. Men are changing all the time. We're very fickle. Women especially. La donne mobile quanto è il vento. Woman is fickle as much as the wind. That's not me, that's Verdi, so don't blame me. But of course, women are also much more steadfast. When they're steadfast, they were there at the foot of the cross when the men had all run away, except for St. John. So, and our Lord rewarded Mary Magdalene for that reason. So, women are usually either better or worse than men. Usually. Only God can be the central purpose of God and man. Man that changes cannot be the purpose of God who's changeless, for reasons said, because then man would be perfecting God. Therefore, God and not man is at the center of all creation. But by the false modern philosophy of personalism, the human person can only be end purpose and he can never be means. This is modern philosophy, personalism. It arose with existentialism at the end of the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, the world was in ruins. Germany had been smashed to pieces by the Allied bombers. A massive Allied shipping was at the bottom of the Atlantic, thanks to the U-boats. America never got bombed, but Europe was devastated. And all ideas were discredited. Fascism, communism, liberalism, you name it, all ideologies were bombed to pieces also. So the philosophers creep out of the ruins and they say, whoa, what is it all about? What is it for? What remains? And they said, existence. Existence. Essences are all nonsense, that's fascism and communism. Existence. Well, leaving aside all the ideas, just raw existence. That's the philosophy of existentialism. It's pretty bare. There's nothing there. Similarly, who is left? Who is left? Hitler's dead, Churchill is raving, Roosevelt is dead, Stalin is going to get killed in 1953. Who's still living? A mass of people, 66 million people are dead. Who's living? The person. The person. The existence of the person. You can see how the philosophers are trying to get right down to basics and eliminate everything else. Well, you know, I'll tell you one thing. I'll bet you that love was still going on in the ruins. Having children was still going on. It wasn't just the existence of the person. And actually the Ten Commandments were still up and running, if you think about it. So Moses never said that the Ten Commandments are going to go out of force in 1945. So actually there was, common sense says there was a lot that was still up and running. Nevertheless, the thinkers, without God, and godlessness was the main cause of those two world wars. Without God, what is left? The person. So you can see this idea of the person without God leads to the idea of everything centering on man and not on God. So Vatican II is going along with the modern world. Man is everything and God is nothing. Or God is secondary. Man is primary and God is secondary. An attitude coming out of, so to speak, the end of the Second World War. And that Vatican II was highly influenced by that. So the modern philosophy, by the false modern philosophy of personalism, the human person can only be an end person, and he can never be an end purpose, and the human person can never be a means. This is again a modern philosopher's attempt to say in what the person consists. Well, he's meant to go to heaven. Forget heaven. That's fairy tales. No. But he's looking for some kind of explanation to give value to the human person. So what he says is, well, the human person, if I think about it, he's always the purpose. Man is the purpose. Man is the center. Man is the purpose, and everything else is means. The trees, the stones, the animals, the plants. That's all means for man as purpose. Man is the purpose. Man is the end, the purpose of everything else, and including God. That's where the devil sticks his foot in. Okay, let's have a look at an argument. See if you can nail the errors, because this argument, some of you may not be able to read it, but some of you may. This is a major, a first minor, a first conclusion, a second minor, and a second conclusion. This is it's logical. God's glory is in his handiwork. Okay. Now man, because he's uniquely free among creatures, is God's supreme handiwork. Okay. Therefore, to glorify the human person, man, is supremely to glorify God. Get it? So to glorify the person is to glorify God. So we're going to glorify the person. Don't say this is just humanism and it's turning away from God. No. We're glorifying the human person in such a way as to glorify God. But the human person is end and not means. Therefore, to glorify man as an end and not as a means is supremely to glorify God. Clever, yeah? But what it means is, if I glorify man as man, for man, purpose of man, man is the end purpose of everything, I'll make God tag along behind. I'll bring God along behind. That's the root of Vatican II. So, Where are the errors? Well, God's glory is in his handiwork. Is that true? What is God's real glory? Himself, exactly. So the theologians distinguish between God's intrinsic glory and his extrinsic glory. His extrinsic glory is from creation. His intrinsic glory is what he's had from all eternity and what he cannot not have. Which of the two glories is greater? In God. Therefore, the exterior glory has as its purpose the interior glory. Therefore, even if we said that the exterior glory is glorious, it's peanuts compared with the interior glory. So, God's glory is in his handiwork, yes, a smaller part of God's glory, but not his real glory, which is in him, and which is prior to anything and everything ever created, and in comparison to which everything that he ever created is peanuts. You go to the end of the universe, to all the galaxies, all the stars. God could create with a flick of his finger as many galaxies again. He could create far more than he's ever created with creation, as we have it. Therefore, what we have as creation today is by no means the full force or power of God. It's a small part of his full glory and power. Therefore, to pretend, say God's glory is in his handiwork, his secondary glory, a minor glory, yes. His major glory, no way. So we're off, that's an ambiguity. That's next. Man, because uniquely free among creatures, is God's supreme handiwork. Now, is freedom the real glory of man? What makes man different from all other creatures? Does freedom make him different from all other creatures? Yes, it does, actually. It does. No other creature, except the angels. But they don't count because they happened before. They happened at the beginning of creation. But actually, yes. But is man's freedom the root of his value, his dignity, his importance? Or is something else the root of man's freedom? Man's freedom is the manifestation of that, in which case it's true to say man's freedom is a manifestation of his dignity, but it's not the root of his dignity. What is the root of his dignity? What makes man different from all the other animals?
His will. His will.
You're spattering the target.
It's made in the image of God, free will.
Free will is important for sure.
Right.
Is free will the root?
Intellect, I guess.
If it's for God.
Reason. Reason, which includes those two spiritual faculties. So it's man's spirituality, his freedom, his dignity go together. But which of the three is the basis of man's reason, spirituality, freedom, dignity? The four go together. Which is the root of the other three? Answer: reason. Modern man says freedom. Now, why does modern man say freedom while the church says reason? Because if I say it's reason, then I have to use my free will in accordance with reason, otherwise I'm going to lose my dignity. Right? So, whereas if I say man's freedom is the root of my dignity, in that case I am free to do as I like, exactly. So if I say reason is the root of my freedom, is the root of my dignity, I've got to obey God. Aristotle said virtue is in behaving reasonably. He didn't have Christ, he didn't have the incarnation, he didn't have the wisdom of the church, but he saw that that man must behave reasonably. There's an obligation to behave reasonably. If you're honest, you know that. You know right and wrong. Every man has a conscience. Every man, until a man dulls his conscience, he knows that there is a right and there is a wrong, and he knows he's got to do right and avoid wrong, and not do wrong. So the root, now it's a very interesting point, why reason is the root of freedom. And the answer is because an animal is shut in on its instincts. An animal can't disobey its instincts. An animal's behavior is guided by the instincts that God has implanted in it. If a dog is hungry and there's a plate of red meat accessible, he's going to go for it. If there's a cold stream in between the dog and the red meat, he's going to come up to the edge of the cold stream. He's going to put his front feet in the stream. He's going to, but it's going to look as though he's making up his mind between the red meat, which he wants, and the cold water, which he doesn't want. But he's not making up his mind. He hasn't got a mind to make up. What you're observing, it looks like he's making up his mind, but in reality, he's making up his instincts. It's a clash of two instincts. The instinct to go for the meat and the instinct to avoid the cold water. And it's quite different from a man making up his mind. A dog cannot take a cold shower as penance, because his instincts rule it out, and there's nothing to overrule the instincts. But in human beings there's a reason which says, I want to get to heaven, I need to do penance, and I'm going to do penance by a cold shower. My instincts, ouch, no. But I'm going to endure the cold shower because my reason is overpowering my instincts, which it's designed to do. The instincts sometimes give the reason a very hard time, and the instincts overwhelm the reason. That's when we sin often. But in any case, there's a complete difference between a human being and an animal, and that difference is reason, which manifests itself as free will. Therefore, freedom is the manifestation of human dignity, but it's not the root of human dignity. Key error. Modern man adores liberty. His religion is liberalism, which is the worship of liberty. But it's a religion, but it's false, because it's not freedom that is the root of man's dignity, it's his reason. And if I think about it, I can see that. The dignity of a man consists not in his following his instincts. He can do some very stupid and base things if he follows his instincts. But if a man controls his instincts according to reason, then he has dignity. Then he's behaving like a human being instead of behaving like an animal. Therefore, the root, man chooses liberty as the root of his dignity so that he can then do as he likes. My dignity is to commit sin just as much as I like. That's my greatness. And Vatican II will even suggest, man has more freedom than God. We're getting into blasphemy. Because God can't commit evil and I can. Yeah? Yes?
What is man doing when he's taking freedom away from other men?
He's depriving them of their outer freedom. He's not usually depriving them of their inner freedom. If I'm in prison behind bars, I can't walk around town, but I can still glorify God or abuse God in my cage, in my prison. So man can take away the less important freedom from his fellow men, but he can't take away the devil can't take away inner freedom. The devil can't take away our free will. Free will is inalienable. A man has an inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Which liberty is it to which he has an inalienable right? His free will. His free will is inalienable, but he doesn't have a right to do wrong. He's got free will to do wrong, but he's not got a right to do wrong. So you've got to distinguish between freedom as a faculty and freedom as a right. And God gives to men freedom as a faculty, free will, He doesn't give us the right, he gives to nobody the right to do wrong. But modern man pretends that he's got a right to do wrong. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Well,
I bring it up because what we see currently going on is that there's a desire on the part of some men to take over the external freedom.
yeah, sure, but you know, if you, from a Catholic point of view, that's a secondary freedom.
Yeah, that's clear from
Okay, so that's a man, because uniquely free among creatures, is God's supreme handiwork. No, God, because rational, like the angels, unlike the animals, unlike animal, vegetable, or mineral, man is it's a man's reason that lifts him above animal, vegetable, mineral, not his freedom. Therefore, to glorify the human person is supremely to glorify God. Well, is that true for Stalin? Is it true for Churchill? Is this true for F.D. Roosevelt? To glorify those human persons is supremely to glorify God? Human persons can be very wicked. Therefore, to glorify the human person, if he's a saint, is supremely to glorify God. If he's made good use of his free will, but if he's made rotten use of his free will, no. There's a difference between right and wrong. To affirm that I have the right to do as I like is to say there's no difference between right and wrong. And every man's conscience, unless and until he dulls it, and unless and until he strangles his conscience, every man's conscience tells him that there's a right and a wrong, and he must do right and he must not do wrong. But the human person is an end, not means. He's a subordinate end. He's a secondary or tertiary end, yes. He's the primary end, no. The primary end is God. Both of God and of man, the primary end is God. Therefore, to glorify man as end and not means is supremely to glorify God. You can see where the argument is going. We're going to make a religion of glorifying man as end, not means, in accordance with modern philosophy, in order to glorify God. Oh boy, oh no, 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 no. If I glorify man simply as man, I'm going to glorify some real villains. Man as man is not a sure way of glorifying God. I can come across a certain number of villains and I can say God is a villain. God must be a villain to have made these men. So to glorify men as men is not necessarily going to be glorifying God. But that's what Vatican II is saying. It's the essence of the error of Vatican II, I think you can say. So you've got, to start with, a major error about God. His exterior glory is for his interior glory. And his interior glory far surpasses, infinitely surpasses exterior glory. Man uniquely, because free is the supreme handiwork of God. No, because he's rational. And it's his reason can rise above his instincts. Instincts are trapped. Reason is not trapped. Reason is free ranges. Reason ranges free. My mind can go, physically, I'm contained at this moment inside this room. But my mind can go to the other end of the earth, it can go to the other end of the universe. So the mind and will are not trapped, like instincts are. And that's the difference between human beings and animals. And all the time, the television programs are trying to tell us that man is just an animal. You've got a picture of an aquarium, and inside there are two dolphins. And on television, you've got this man in a white suit with big, thick spectacles. He's an intellectual. He's a scientist. Oh, science. Then they've got an interview. Mr. Science, what are these dolphins saying to one another? And then one of the dolphins, Mr. Scientist, what did the dolphins say? Well, actually, that was actually Mr. Dolphin saying to Mrs. Dolphin, good morning. Oh, was it? Oh, yes. Oh, my. Oh, gosh. And then the other dolphin, Mr. Scientist, what did the other dolphins say to the first? He said to her, get lost. These programs come on, one after another, on television. Each one is more stupid than the last. That's television. That's the Freemasons. That's the enemies of God at work to wreck people's common sense and to wreck people's minds so that they will become easy fodder for the Antichrist. That's our work. So there you've got kind of the heart of Vatican II. So you have here. Then we'll deal just with the causes, the material cause. So there's the grave error in the final cause in pretending that man is the primary end of creation, which is what Vatican II pretends. Man is not the primary end of creation. God is the primary end of creation, of all creation, and of himself. And it can't be otherwise. So we move on to the material cause. But the new humanism is sticking to Christ and the church. Now, admittedly, humanisms tend to get away from God. But we, this time, we're Catholics. We're the Catholic churchmen. And we're going to make a new humanism which is going to stick to God. So since they're going to stick to Christ and his church, then the material end, the material out of which the new humanism will make the new church, is everything of the old church, but everything renewed. It can't be the same as the old church. They're sticking, so it's always the same. Humanism being Catholic. So since it's humanism, it's inclining to get away from God, but since it's Catholic, it's going to stick to Christ and the church. So sticking to Christ and the church, then it's going to take all the material of the old church, but it's got to make it new. It's got to be a new humanism. If it simply reran the four previous humanisms, then we'd be back to God getting shut out and nothing Catholic. We're going to make this new humanism Catholic. Therefore, we're going to stick to Christ and his church. Therefore, we're going to take everything of the old church and transform it by the new humanism, which is going to make it godly as well as human. So you can see it's a principle of these characters, a driving principle to take everything of the old church and renew it, or change it, get rid of it, to get rid of the old church. That's Pope Francis. You can watch him at the job. There's the faithful come to kiss his ring, he pulls his hand away. The choir boy folds his hands piously. What are you doing there? Get your hands apart. In every little detail, he's got to get away from the old church. It's a driving principle. It's a diabolical principle. But the old church, the old church,